For the n-Lorem Foundation, N of 1 doesn't mean alone because every patient matters. Hope for nano-rare patients and their families has never been more within reach. Visit n-Lorem.org today to donate and make hope possible. This episode of the n-Lorem Patient Empowerment Program podcast is proudly sponsored by Hanjin Biotech. With more than 26 years of experience in the nucleic acid industry, Hanjin is a specialized CDMO and raw material supplier committed to providing high-quality and high-value products and services with the best-in-class lead times.
Hello and welcome to the n-Lorem podcast series, the only podcast series focused exclusively on the needs of patients with nano-rare mutations. I'm Stan Crook. I'm the founder, chairman, and CEO of n-Lorem, and I'm your host on this podcast series. And today we have as our special guests Robert, Bobby, Glenn, and Nicole, who are, among other things, parents of Rosie. We tend to end up labeling our parents of as opposed to individual human beings. So I'm guilty of that, but welcome.
Thank you
Thanks so much.
Yeah. And so we'll talk about Rosie in a little bit, but I thought first I'd begin by just talking about you. And so I guess you prefer Bobby, Robert?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to call you Bobby in the diminutive here, and
It's okay.
we're all minimized sufficiently in this world. We can avoid that, I guess. But so, Bobby, you're a senior person in kind of a new industry that sort of reflects, I guess, the emergence of the nuclear family and two wage earners in every family, and that's sort of help finding home health care. Do I understand that right? Or home care?
Yeah, I was at care.com. I've actually since left. Since we started the trial with Rosie, we kind of just realized we couldn't have two wage earners. It was just, we were kind of too busy going back and forth to New York. And so I stopped working and taking a little backseat right now and I'm a homemaker.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask how you guys were doing it because the vast majority of parents of nano-rare kids end up having at least one other person stop working, and in some cases, both parents stop working. And that's one of the more heartrending lessons of this journey for me is to look at the impact of these mutations on families, not just the patient. And so, because I was really wondering, Nicole, because you're a pediatrician, are you in a group practice or academic or?
I'm in a outpatient, like sort of primary care, but also multi-specialty group practice. So I'm in clinic full time, and that was part of the change. I was pretty part-time. Before Rosie was born, I was working full time, and then have scaled back slowly. And then as we sort of had to reshuffle responsibilities and care, that's where it made sense, actually, because I'm able to kind of flex up and down. I started working more full time, and now that's why Bob's at home, kind of helping to manage everything with Rosie, which is a full-time job in and of itself. So it was a little hard. I love to be at all of her medical appointments and all of her therapies as the physician, but it didn't quite make sense for our sort of balance at home. So that part's been a little hard to give up, but I'm still involved and, take care of a lot of the medical stuff in the back end. But that's the way we've kind of managed to flex it. So luckily, pediatrics is a very family friendly field. So my colleagues and patients, honestly, a lot of them do know about Rosie, are pretty flexible when I do have to take extended leaves because we are out for the trial or for seizures or medical things that come up. So, and it's been actually well received by my group and my patients.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll stay on this for a bit because I think the lessons here for folks are painful and important to learn, and every family has to manage it differently. And giving up a career that you've built would be very, very difficult for me. I imagine it would be difficult for anybody. So, Bobby, you actually gave up your career so you can care for Rosie full time. How did how did you come to that? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it was tough. It was, to Nick's point, I think, in corporate America, really, your options were I can either work full time or zero. Very flexible between those two amount of hours, right? There wasn't a lot of part time options, and Nick did have the ability to scale up or down, and so it kind of made sense on that side. But it was a difficult transition. Like it was tough. To Nick's point, like I really deferred most of the medical stuff to you, and now I'm taking her to the appointments, and just a lot of learning along the way. But it's at the end of the day, you just sort of realize it's like, hey, we got to do what's best for our family right now, and like it or not, this is the situation we're in. So we got to figure out something that's going to work for you.
Yeah. I mean, it has been a big adjustment, but I think overall, it has also relieved a lot of stress. I think, it's hard, a lot of families can't survive off of one income. And so that's always that financial stress. But I think the day-to-day stress of like trying to balance, okay, well, I have to do work and you have to do this, but we need to do that. And kind of the push-pull, I ended up being better for Rosie, the kids, and for us to have one of us home. And it just helps because things come up. We have so many last-minute changes. Rosie's got a new appointment. Something is different clinically with her today. She's not feeling well. And it's so hard to not have that flexibility. And the constant, okay, well, who's taking the day off to deal with this? And it was so hard.
No, it is among the many, many things I've learned in doing n-Lorem, aside from the pleasure of meeting people who take what life gives them and make the best of it, which is something that we get to see at n-Lorem every day, and it's been a remarkable privilege for me to watch, and life throws challenges at you that you don't expect, and you have to adjust, right?
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
So then you're the mom, and you're a pediatrician, and now you don't get to be intimate with every minute of every day, and Bobby is, and so that can't feel good.
Feels complicated.
Yeah, that part's hard. Yeah,
that part is hard. So luckily I still have a little bit of flexibility. I'm almost full time, but so I do get to be around. But yeah, that part is hard. I think not being as involved in the medical care is hard for me, and I always feel like it puts such a big burden on Bobby's shoulders. If he comes home from an appointment, I'm like, "Did you ask this? What about that? Did you say this?" But that's why you should be there.
Yeah, and you used to have it. It was very segmented. It was like, okay, you handle financial stuff, I'll handle medical stuff, and now it's
I see the scars on you there, Bobby. I'm familiar with some of those.
But yeah, that part is hardest. But I think too, there's so much expectation. Like there's also societal pressures about what your roles are supposed to be and how that all plays out. And I think being in California has been really helpful. We live in a place that embraces lots of different lifestyles, and we have a really good community, and people know that I'm a physician, and they know that my schedule's inflexible, and that Bob's an amazing dad, and so I think generally it's been embraced by everyone, and our neurotypical son seems to think this is normal. She's like, "Oh, let's play mommy and daddy. Okay, you go to work and I'll stay home." So
yeah, Jack Spy.
He seems to think like this is how it is. It's totally okay. But.
So you're at Sutter Health, is that right? Yeah. And, it's odd, but a fellow I went to medical school with, John Rose, was a general practitioner, I think, in Sutter Health. And actually, it was started as a public health service, and John was, I think, the first physician there. He tried to get me to go, but I had no interest in being a primary doctor. Thank you very much.
Not for the faint of heart. Primary care is hard, but That name does sound familiar for sure. And I'm actually, Sutter's so big. I'm part of a smaller division of Sutter. But Sutter's kind of, it's nice to have that support of like a bigger organization. But so I'm part of Palo Alto Medical Foundation. It sort of started in the Palo Alto, sort of Stanford area, and then has spread throughout the Bay. So it's a great group. And, I'm actually really surprised how well we're able to care for some of my own medically complex patients, which has been, this experience has changed my practice and the way I approach families and listen to parents and help them advocate the system. And so we do a pretty good job. I'm proud of Sutter, but we're so lucky to be in the Bay with UCSF and Stanford and with so many options. And, so I feel for my community pediatricians in places that don't have that amazing referral access who are trying to take care of kids like mine. I think that would be so hard. And then those families who are traveling so far to access. So, that part has been, I know it's so much easier for us to access the system, for me to get her in, to ask the right questions. And so, that has been such a huge blessing. And it makes me realize how hard it is for other families who are not savvy.
Yeah. We've played the insider card a few times and I'm not ashamed to say it. Yeah.
So how rapidly did you get a diagnosis for Rosie?
It still took longer than I thought. And it to me, that has been such a learning point for, like, as a primary care pediatrician. I mean, we started right away and I knew something was wrong immediately. And we started seeing neurology and started doing, tests. We had an MRI by 9 months and we did what I thought was standard genetic testing, before she was a year. We didn't get an answer. And so then we sort of lived with this like vague cerebral palsy diagnosis for about a year, so by the time she was 2. And I didn't know anything about whole exome sequencing. That wasn't something I was taught. And we all talked about, you just hear this like, oh, it's not going to change anything. It's not going to change anything. So we had one doc who brought it up and said, do you want to see genetics? Should we order a whole exome? And I was like, I'm not going to find anything. What's the point? And I can't believe I felt that way as a physician. And so by the time we finally got around to like, sure, it's, it's going to take us 6 months to get an appointment in San Francisco to do this test. Sure, we might as well. I was shocked when her exome results came back positive. And so she was around 2.5 when we got that diagnosis. And
then everything changed.
Everything changed. But it has been such like a goal of mine and lesson. And there are several other rare disease parents who are in the medical field of like, we need to make sure that people understand that you can do something. It does make a difference that microarray, there are way more things we can do and you shouldn't stop, and how do we support families in understanding why that's important? Because they come back to their primary care doc and say, do you think this is important? And I was uneducated on the subject and now I have more education than I ever wanted on it, but that's important. So the testing has really, her diagnosis has changed our life and we would be in a completely different place with her without that diagnosis.
And I'm sure you've heard that story from people left and right? Of like, this isn't going to make a difference. This isn't going to change anything. Don't bother getting the whole exome. Yeah.
Well, we have a paper coming out where we talk about the first 173 cases that we processed, and the range of the symptom onset to diagnosis is 1 month to 36 years. And what that teaches is these journeys are highly idiosyncratic, and they don't need to be. And all of us need to band together and drive whole genome sequencing into newborn evaluation protocols. And, n-Lorem, I think, will be the tip of that spear because we're the answer to the critic who says, well, you probably can't do anything anyway. Why diagnose? And the answer to diagnosis is it saves heartache and it saves money. Yeah, I think anybody who knows anything about the practice of medicine learns pretty quickly that having a name to put to something, having a cost to put to something, is a big change, right?
Huge.
Yeah. There is so much guilt among parents who don't know what's going on with their kid. What did I do? Why? And I will admit, we went through that. Did I do something, especially when we had this nebulous cerebral palsy diagnosis? Did I do something wrong? Did she have a stroke? Did I not eat enough? And even though you're not supposed to, you do that to yourself. And I think having that name of like, this is what this is. It's freeing in a way. And I think parents live with that question for so long, and that wonder and that not knowing drives you a little crazy. It's what keeps you awake at night.
Yeah.
No, so the big lesson is get a diagnosis, get a cause, feel better.
Yeah, diagnosis matters.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, just from a scientific perspective, I've always sort of struggled now that I think about it, like that's how we progress medicine. If you don't know you don't know the cause of it, you'll never develop a treatment. And so just because we don't have a treatment right now doesn't mean we shouldn't continue that process so that we will get there.
Yeah.
It's like that, that
you don't measure it, you can't study.
a constant
It's simple, right?
learning, like the medicine, you're supposed to be a lifelong learner. And it's like, you have to understand things to be able to get to that next step. So even if there is no answer now, doesn't mean there won't be in the future if you don't keep asking.
And you both are highly educated. You're a pediatrician, and you didn't know some of the things you needed to know to take care of your daughter.
Oh,
and now I really want people to hear that there is no lack of knowledge that is bad. There's no teaching that's stupid, and this is all at the cutting edge of science. And one of the challenges that we have is most physicians have really no training to even set them up to deal with these kinds of patients that we're dealing with. And it's a big lesson, I think.
Yeah, it is. And I think too, just understanding what life is like for these families, I will say, like, I think that part is missed. And, depending upon your team, and you may see your child's quality of life very different, and you may have very different goals of care and all these things. And I think that has been really eye-opening too, that I don't think physicians necessarily get a lot of training into seeing what it's like for these families and understanding what you're asking them to do, or the way you talk about their child, or the way you describe, that therapy's not worth it. It's like, not worth it to you or not worth it to me? Like, what is worth here? We're talking about my child. And I think sometimes we miss that humanity when dealing with these really complex kids. And so that's been really eye-opening for me as well. And I think about, I trained at Stanford. I took care of incredibly complex kids. And I think back to some of the things or the assumptions I had about what these kids' lives were like, or these families' kids' lives were like. And I had no clue. I had no idea. And
I spent all my career making drugs and for large patient populations and creating this technology. And early in my career, I saw patients that they were cancer patients, and I graduated to very senior positions very quickly, and I just couldn't treat them part time, and I miss seeing patients for now a lifetime. And doing n-Lorem for me has been like returning to the practice of medicine, and has reminded me of how humbling diseases are, how they debilitate, humiliate, destroy, take away aspirations, the ability to do the simple things, hopes that you have for your child. These are all siphoned off as a product of these things in the midst of trying to take care of a child who isn't well, often not happy and crying and all those challenges. And I think somehow getting those messages across is really, really important part of what we're trying to do. And we're learning a lot about how to listen better to caregivers. And you're finding that. I mean, we're depending on you, among others, to help us understand whether we're doing Rosie any good or not, or whether we're doing her harm, or what have you. So let's talk about, you got a diagnosis. Tell me what the diagnosis was.
HNR-NPH2. Yeah.
HNR-NPH2.
Easy to see. Yeah, rolls right off the tongue.
Yeah, I know about that one. And Nicole, of course, you had all that training in medical school and residency. You knew all about it right away, right? What's an HNR-NPH2, for God's sake, right?
person that I know that's in marketing was like, you got to do something about that name. If you're going to try to raise money for this disorder, man, you got to change that name.
Well, one of the things that frustrates me about scientists is that we tend to use big words when small words would suffice. And then we have to create all these stupid abbreviations because we can't afford the space in the manuscripts, right? Nobody wants to write it out. So let me take a crack at this. Let's see how HNRNPH2 stands for heterogeneous nuclear RNA binding protein H2. Okay.
Exactly.
And so parsing that, heterogeneous, a diverse group of proteins that bind to RNA and are located in the nucleus. That's what this is. I actually, as a graduate student, was in a lab among the many labs that were trying to understand nuclear proteins, among other things, and nuclear RNAs. And that term heterogeneous nuclear RNA protein came because when we tried to separate them, we got a big smear. And so we had to think of something smart to say. We called them heterogeneous nuclear. We couldn't call it a smear of proteins. You had to do something smart. And it turns out that these aren't that heterogeneous. They're fairly diverse, but they're proteins that are made to bind to RNA. And you need those proteins to manage your RNA, the processing of your RNA, putting it in the cell where it's supposed to go and do all those things. So now we know that she has a mutation in a protein that's required to bind to some RNAs and do something, right? And to reduce it to its really simple stuff. In chemistry, size, shape, charge matter. You can think about RNA as kind of a ribbon, and you're putting it around a box, a gift, and it makes bows, and there are certain rules for what it does. And so if you think about a protein that's going to interact with RNA, somewhere in that protein probably has to be a fairly flat surface with some positively charged amino acids. And that's called an RNA binding motif. And all these RNA binding proteins typically have one or two or three of those motifs. And so even if you didn't know about them, if you saw one of these proteins and you saw a big bunch of positive charges located in one place, you might think, okay, maybe that thing is trying to bind to my RNA. Okay. So now you've got the mutation, but that doesn't tell you why Rosie's sick, right?
Yeah. Who'd we talk to first? Who called, Trish or Jen? Who'd you talk to?
I actually talked to Dr. Jen Bain within hours of getting her diagnosis. So,
you were on the horn pretty quick. Yeah.
It still took us a long. It still feel like there's still so much confusion about like exactly why it is. I mean, my take of it is this is something that's important for all of her cells and making proteins and the communication within the cell. And so if you mess that up, then the messages are going to get disrupted. I think Trish, one of our Yellow Brick Road project president, likes to describe it as like the mail delivery. It's like the mail. It's like, all the packages are going all over the place instead of going to the place they're supposed to. And like then packages are getting lost and things are getting gummed up in the works. And so I think to me that makes sense. I'm sure there's a better explanation, but which then, thinking about it affects everything. I mean, it's every part of her development, every part of her body. It's, it's such an important protein. So
let me take a crack at it. See how I do here. Mammalian cells have three compartments. They have a nucleus, which you can think of as sort of the brain center, the nerve center of the cell, the cytoplasm. The nucleus is the executive offices, the cytoplasm is the factory floor. And then you've got mitochondria that are making the energy. You can think of your solar panels as your mitochondria. And all that's good. But all those proteins that go to the nucleus are made in the cytoplasm, in the factory. And so they have to have directions to go back to the nucleus. And those things are called nuclear localization signals. So nuclear proteins typically have nuclear localization signals that direct them back to the nucleus. Okay, and HNRNPs do. And often in HNRNPH2, the mutation occurs in the nuclear localization signal, which results in that protein, which needs to be in the nucleus, ended up in little granules in the cytoplasm. And not only does it mess up the nucleus and what it's supposed to do, but it traps like other proteins in that little granule. And so you make a big mess.
Yeah.
Is that pretty much explain it?
Yeah. I remember that first meeting, seeing the, fluorescent hybridization of like a normal cell and then an HNRMPH2 cell and all the green in the cytoplasm. I was just thinking like, well, that's all not supposed to be there. And that can't be good. And how much is that gumming up the works? But
it's messing up a lot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we understand the cause of the problem. And we know that it's a toxic gain of function mutation because it mislocalizes that protein. And in that mislocalization, you're losing the ability to manage your nuclear RNAs in the way they need. And you're also trapping it in the cytoplasm, and that's causing trouble. And so that's a big day when you actually understand that. And it's not something that you didn't do. It's not something that you did. It's just nature. It's bad luck, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But it's bad luck. It's really bad luck. How do you deal with that? How do you come to terms with that?
That takes time.
Yeah. I think both of our natures tends to be when something that bad like that happens, and we focus on, okay, well, how do we help? How do we fix it?
Yeah.
And like we poured ourselves into fixing it for a while. And yeah.
I mean, that by nature, kind of like, okay, what do we do? I need to be involved, getting connected. I think there's so many different ways you process that. And I think the piece that takes time for a lot of families, and we have mostly gotten there, is sort of processing your grief too, about like what you thought life was going to be like and sort of why is this happening, and fear, and then eventually getting to learning how to find that both things can be true. You're sad about the things you lost. This is stressful, but also like feeling grateful that you have this wonderful kid in this amazing community who is so special and unique in her own ways. And so you develop this love for this rare disease community that you never found the joy. You find the joy, which we have, but it's still hard. It's both. And I think that's where I'm sure one of the messages for these families is it can be both, right? I mean, it can be hard and devastating and awful, and it is at many times, but we also do find like joy and, this amazingness in the life that it is. And but that takes time, and it changes, I think, even day to day or month to month. We have months that are good and months that are bad, and places where we're in a better place and times we're not in a great place. And that's the roller coaster of our journey.
Yeah. I don't think I tried to process any grief for the first year or two. I think I just I joined the board of a nonprofit that was like raising money for it, focused on trying to work on the natural history study, and just working was really my answer for a while.
Then you make it a mission.
Yeah.
And you learn to live with it.
Yeah.
But I think the community is so critical for helping support families. I mean, I have found so much support among the community. And even like you were saying earlier, even as a physician, we don't know everything. And I still rely on the community for, hey, what did you guys do about this? Or what do you think about that? Or how do we do this? And just helping you not feel alone in this ultra rare diagnosis. Who has this? No one's heard of this. So having the community has really made it all just so much more palatable.
Yeah. So now we come to the decision to actually treat Rosie. And
you were saying like we're so unlucky, but I think there are times where we feel so lucky. Like we have this nano-rare diagnosis and there is a treatment and they do understand how the gene works. Like we still feel like we hit the jackpot. Like,
Oh, yeah.
even though we didn't, but like
That first family meeting, I remember they were like, well, maybe in 10 years. And that was 2018, 2019.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Maybe. If you can find 350 patients, which we haven't, we've only have 200. So we were, up until all of this, we thought we were still years away from treatments for anybody. So we feel incredibly lucky lately.
Yeah, and of course that's why n-Lorem exists. It wasn't exactly what I planned to do in my retirement, but it's what I have to do. So, and it's been, like the rest of my life, a great privilege, much more privilege than I have earned. But there comes a moment, though, when you have to ask yourself, this is an experimental treatment. It's never been in a child. My child is going to be the first child to receive this. There's very little data. How about the risk? Is it worth it? How do you process that? How did you wrestle that to the ground?
I know we do make it seem right now like it's so easy. It was hard. It was really hard. I will say, I think instinctually, my first thought was like, of course. And then like, as the rubber hit the road and we were like, we're really doing this, that's when like the fear really set in. And I was scared.
Yeah, you were, yeah.
I think a lot of it is knowing what kind of a company n-Lorem is. I mean, meeting with, Lawrence Mignon was so helpful, and going through, okay, here's what we've done, here's the testing, here, just this incredible information of safety and how careful and thoughtful and just, okay, this is why we think this is as safe as it can be. We have huge faith in Dr. Jen Bain, and was like, she has treated other kids obviously with ASOs, and was like, I truly believe she wouldn't put us in harm's way unless she thought, and ASOs luckily are not new technology. And, there's like a Dravet trial and Angel, there's, so I think as a physician, I really leaned on that. I really leaned around the like, okay, this is like an amazing company with an amazing leader who like.
We heavily researched n-Lorem and Ionis.
Well, all my bad secrets. It
was very comforting, actually. But yeah.
So that part helped. But you're right, that fear that like every parent goes through, like that, like this has never been in, and I would never want to do something that's going to hurt my child. And we're fortunate that we don't think of HNR and PH2 as like a degenerative, life-limiting disorder potentially. And so, is this the right decision? And that
she's happy. Rosie's a really happy kid.
It is a happy kid, most of the time, and that was really hard. I got pretty scared. I like that whole week before the trial, before we did her first dose, I was a mess, like crying every day, just like scared.
Yeah.
And it's hard because our community, everyone was really excited. This is going to make her better. And so you want to be hopeful and hold on to that. But I was really scared.
And, like full disclosure, when we agreed, we said, yeah, we'll be first. We didn't know there was going to be 3. And we were like, we gladly would have gone second. But.
And of course, it has to be dosed intrathecally. And that means you have to anesthetize her, and you have to put her in take her to the hospital, and every interaction with a medical system for your little loved one is you're entrusting somebody else with a life that you created. That's hard.
It is.
And we also lost one of the girls in our community around the time. Like I said, this isn't supposed to be it's not degenerative, but one of our founding members lost their daughter to basically a seizure. She went into status epilepticus and never came out of it. And so I think there was this like, we are living in fear every day. She is healthy. happy and relatively healthy compared to some other disorders. But we do have this fear all the time. Is she going to have a seizure? Is this next thing going to be it? Is she?
And her seizures are bad.
And they're bad. And is she
going for a really?
She going to aspirate while we're feeding her? And I was like, we're already living in fear constantly that something bad is going to happen. So, at least this is.
So bottom line, that the mutation is there and it's going to cause trouble. It's costing people every day. And to take some risks to try to address that in the end makes sense.
Yeah. Because doing nothing is a choice, right? That's still a choice of opting to not. And so it's, you're making a choice either way.
Yeah.
So she's had how many doses now?
3.
Yeah.
And she had a bad seizure. I want to really, I don't want to put you through reliving that, but I think it's really important for everyone to understand it. We know very little about these diseases, and there's risk. There's real risk that we have to accept. And so you begin treating Rosie, and then right away or shortly, she has a terrible seizure, and what did you think? Oh my God, have I made a mistake and given her an ASO that's causing her to seize, or how did you deal with that?
I didn't. I mean, she's had seizures before. It was actually, it been 4 years to the day, from the first one.
Yeah.
2
years from her last,
and 2 years from the last one, and they're not very frequent, but they're bad. So I wasn't, I guess I wasn't thinking that the ASO had caused it, but I had hoped that the ASO, we wouldn't have anymore, right? You're being very optimistic of well, maybe we're not going to have them anymore. Now we're done. Amazing. Yeah.
I will say I didn't really think it was the ASO. I mean, I know it could be, I guess it could be, but in my mind, I was just more sad that this is of all of the things I would love to get through this. This is the life-threatening fear that we have that she will seize and not come out of it. And so when it happened, it was we've only had 3 doses, but there was a little man, I was really hoping that all the things that would get better would be this.
So, okay, enough bad stuff. How's she doing?
She's doing great. Yeah. I mean, outside the seizure, she's been, eye contact is amazing. She's using her talker more. She's able to communicate more what she wants. She's standing so much better than she was before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this it's hard to describe, but everybody who interacts with her and sees us on social media just says she looks different. And she looks at you more as opposed to past you. She tracks better. She looks like she's trying. There's just more awareness there. She's paying more attention to things.
She's not in her own world. She used to be, she'd have a toy and she'd be playing with that toy. And now she's playing with that toy, and if it makes a noise, she looks at you to make sure you're looking to see that it's making a noise or doing something. She's just so much more social and so much more aware, and it's really fun to see.
Her, we have one of the skills that has really come and go, and it's been one of the more painful ones to come and go is her verbal ability. And when she was little, she babbled, blah, 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 and we started getting a couple words. For a while, she said mama. For a while, she said dada, and then up is what she used to say. And we lost all of that at 3. And over the years, sometimes we'd go through little phases where we'd get a couple of sounds back. She'd maybe go through a few month phase of going ma, 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 and then it would go away.
I think it was only weeks.
But weeks or months at most. And then otherwise, she's pretty quiet. And the full babbling hasn't come back, but she is every day, all day, ma.
And that was up to the first dose.
Just
to the first.
Trying to use her voice again. And so that has been so awesome to see.
And with purpose, which has never happened. So she'll look at a book she wants to read and go, ma, 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 look at the book, then look at you. Ma, 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 look at the book. Ma, 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 look at you, to make sure you're seeing what she wants, which is incredible. She's never asked for things she wanted. It's always been us just guessing.
Where one of the things that we're learning so much. One of the challenges, how do you assess engagement? What we think of as autistic behavior versus not autistic behavior. What is the intellectual life of a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, and how do you gauge that? And we don't know, and we're all learning as we go. And the other amazing thing that we're learning is that the CNS is vastly more plastic than I was taught. Probably you were taught, Nicole. We're learning this from all sorts of places, but especially at n-Lorem, where we're seeing patients who, in their teens, acquiring skills they never had, reacquiring skills they lost. And so everything you're telling me is consistent with the kinds of changes that we're seeing in many, many patients across the board. We have to learn better how to quantitate this, how to measure these things. There are a lot of different scales. CNS is especially hard. I mean, I can measure kidney function. That's pretty easy, but I can't.
Yeah.
I can't measure 3-year-old intellect, and I don't know what that is, or a 4-year-old, or what have you. Any lessons that you think we ought to take away from your experience?
You mean, I guess, do you mean like about measuring things and the outcome, or you mean like in general?
Well, no, I mean, that's a poorly framed question. My fault. One of the things that I'm really trying hard to do is to learn how to listen to caregivers better, how to help them sort through placebo effects versus real effects. And with both of your educations and training, you may be able to help us more than the average parent.
I see what you're saying. I mean, I think that we think about that. I'm wondering, am I seeing a real effect here? Am I seeing what I want to see? Is it a placebo effect, or is it just that, we do go through times where she's better and not. And so, as a scientist, I agree with you. I understand sort of the importance of something measurable.
And we were really worried about the placebo effect. We made it a point. We didn't tell anyone what we've seen. And we wait for people to tell us to see if it corroborates what we've saw, because we were like, I don't want to sway things.
So multiple observers.
Multiple observers is exactly right.
Multiple observers responding in the same way is probably important.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
I wish we had taken more video before of things. I think that's one thing that I wish that I had thought about doing is, we started like right before, but I wish I had more videos from when she was younger and more videos of just like mundane things that, we video so many fun things, but I feel like that would be so great to sort of have this side by side of like, look, you can't miss it. It's there.
Yeah.
Just so that is something that I think is helpful, because we all have our phones. We're all watching things all the time. And that's helpful. And I think you can just, I think like the asking carriers, like what's meaningful to you, right? Because to us, like eye contact is really meaningful, and it's hard because how do you measure that? But knowing sort of what things really matter, and then you can have better ways of kind of assessing that before and after, I guess.
It's tough. We've talked to our neurologists about that, and we've been thinking about it, in terms of like the nonprofit of just like, how do we track this? And it's hard because it's very subjective.
Yeah.
And
we wrestle with this every day, and Jen is treating quite a number of our patients, and so she has the opportunity to sort of do patient by patient comparisons, and that's very helpful. But these are all just very hard lessons that have to be learned in human beings. We can't learn them in animals. We can't learn them in cells. We have to learn them, and the only way we can learn them is through what I think of as these patients, pioneer patients. Rosie's a pioneer patient. She's blazing the trail for others, and when you blaze a trail, you're going to trip and stumble. Those things will happen. And how do we minimize that and maximize the clarity of the trail that we blaze, I guess, is a question I spent a lot of time thinking about.
We do too. I think, like I said, I don't want to sugarcoat things and make it seem like everything is just so easy. Like, I don't want to give people false hope, right? I don't want to say that like, oh, this is definitely the ASO and it's going to do this and this, because what if it doesn't? And what if it isn't? And what if it's not the same for everybody? And so that balance of, we are going to trip and fall, and we are kind of trying to make this trail. And so it's messy. And so, people want to know, and I want to keep the community informed, and I want to be hopeful, but I also want to be realistic. And recognize that it's hard. It's hard on her. It's hard on us. It's not easy. It's something that we still feel grateful and beyond grateful to do, but it is hard. It's challenging. And it's nice to have other families to talk to about that. I will say it's one thing that's nice about not being the only kid going through this is, having, again, that community is helpful. But making sure we can, I feel the weight of everybody kind of on us, like hoping and wanting to know, and is it working? Is it getting better? Because, you could just, it's palpable, everyone's hopes for their own kids. So it does feel like almost a burden there, even that I can't do anything about it. Like it is what it is.
Yeah, but it's understandable, and yeah.
But I want it to work for them just as much as I want it to work for us.
Yeah, that's expanding your sense of self.
Yeah.
And one of the things about nano-rare mutations is you may be the only human being, and so how do you gain a sense of community? And we are social beings, and you describe how important it is for Rosie to be able to be social, to interact. We depend on that as animals and social animals, and creating a society of the nano-rare is part of one of the goals I have. And these conversations help that, I think, I hope.
Well, I think so.
I think so. I for sure
Connected us with a lot of people. Yeah.
I mean, I imagine even one nano-rare patient knowing that there's somebody else who's nano-rare, even if they're different, at least then you don't, I would hope that makes you feel less alone in some way. I think we've connected to other families with different disorders, and that has been super helpful, even if it's not H&R and PH2. It's like, well, we're all kind of on this crazy journey, and our journeys are different, but it still has like a common thread that we can relate to each other.
Yeah.
Anything I haven't asked that you think I should, or anything you want to say that you think would be important for other families?
I mean, actually, mostly I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
For caring about this population, like you said, especially if you're the only patient, and I'm sure you feel like, why would anyone do anything for me? And so I think we are honored to be part of that program. So thank you for giving our kids this opportunity, this chance.
It's a privilege that we share.
Yeah, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Yeah, thank you very much, and we're just very grateful.
Well, it's very nice to meet you. And thanks for talking with me, and give Rosie a hug for us all, okay? And we will keep our fingers crossed for the best for Rosie and you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
n-Lorem is a nonprofit committed to discovering and providing personalized experimental treatments for free, for life, to patients with genetic diseases that affect 1 to 30 patients worldwide, referred to by n-Lorem as nano-rare. Many of these patients progress and die without ever achieving a diagnosis. This is where n-Lorem comes in. They do the impossible by providing hope, and for those that they can help, free lifetime treatment. For more information about n-Lorem or today's episode, visit n-Lorem.org. Any questions can be sent into podcast@n-Lorem.org. Search n-Lorem on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook to connect with us. This video is hosted by Dr. Stan Crook and produced with the help of the following professionals. Thank you for watching.